Ladies and gentlemen, so I'm starting a brand new series where I'll be looking at all 30 NBA teams and basically providing my analysis on how I think they'll perform this season based on roster moves and transactions they made in the offseason. So the team we'll be looking at today is the Boston Celtics. The Celtics really performed well in the regular season last year. They were second in the Eastern Conference. They won 57 games, and they were led by first-year head coach Joe Mazzulla, who took over for Ime Udoka in the previous season. Um, and the team was number one in net rating. Very good offensively, but also balanced defensively. It's a talented roster, led by superstars Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown. Expectations were really high. So for the team in the playoffs last year, the first round they played against the Atlanta Hawks, 6 game series. They were never really threatened, but they were tested a bit. And then we go to the second round series where they played the Philadelphia 76ers, and that's where things really got tough for them. They were up 2-1 in the series, had a chance to go up 3-1 and really put the hammer in the nail. But they struggled. Game 4, they lost. Then they lost game 5. In game 6, they were basically facing elimination. They came back, responded really well with excellent defense. And then game 7 on the ropes, elimination game again, but at home. And their defense really came through, carried them to the conference finals where they played the Miami Heat. And, this is where things really got ugly because they started down 3-0. A lot of the players, they still were showing confidence, just saying, just let us get a game. Jalen Brown said something along those lines. Let us get a game, and we're gonna come back into this thing. And he wasn't wrong because they won game 4, they won game 5, and then they won game 6. So they were ready to play game 7 at home. In an environment where they really thrived. And they had an opportunity to make it back to the NBA Finals for a second consecutive season, and they got blown out terribly. So very disappointing season in the standards of Boston fans. The team wasn't happy. Fans definitely weren't happy. They couldn't make it back to the finals and finish what they started. So disappointing season, and they were ready to make big moves, and the first one of which was to acquire former All-Star Kristaps Porzingis. So they tried to put together a package with the Clippers in a three-way deal, including Malcolm Brogdon, but the Clippers pulled out after seeing Malcolm's medicals. So they had to quickly pivot, and they decided to loop in the Memphis Grizzlies and trade for Kristaps, but that trade was really expensive for them because they had to include the heart and the soul of the Boston Celtics franchise. Former Defensive Player of the Year Marcus Smart. They had to part ways with Marcus. They did acquire some draft capital, which helps soften the blow a little bit. But Marcus, what he brought to the defensive end, as a leader, as a tough guy, he's a hard guy to replace. And Kristaps, he'll give them that offensive production, and I think he's very talented. Even on the defensive end, as a good shot blocker. But he has big shoes to fill. But then they also made another move where they sent out forward Grant Williams in a sign-in trade to Dallas Mavericks. Picked up a couple of draft picks. Again, theme of picking up some assets where they can. But they lost a rotational player and another tough guy. A guy that contributed offensively as well as defensively. So that was also another loss for the franchise. Um, and then ultimately they did uh, sign a few guys in free agency for the veterans minimum. They picked up former Indiana Pacer O'Shea Brissett, a very talented player, but hasn't really ever been afforded the opportunity to become a mainstay rotational player. And then they also signed former Toronto Raptor Delano Blanton, um, couple years in the NBA, hasn't really been given an opportunity. And then they also signed former Hornet guard Sui. Sui has shown that he can really shoot the ball really well. Would fit in uh, extremely well with the Boston Celtics, but they're a very deep team, so I think seeing any of these three guys play significant minutes is probably out of question. Um, but then there was also two notable contract extensions the team handed out. First of which was to Kristaps Porzingis, 2 years and $60 million, fair value for both team and player. Kristaps is very talented, but has a big injury risk. We've seen him miss a lot of games over the course of his career. So he gets that, um, financial security. And Boston gets a very talented player for, $30 million, which is below market value for what he can do. And then they also handed out the richest contract extension in NBA history. Jaylen Brown, 5 years, $288 million. Brown is a very talented player. I think he's definitely earned his money, but it'll be interesting to see how he ages into that contract where, in year 5, he may be in his somewhere in his 30s and getting 65 plus million. So that will be interesting. Um, and I think based on some of the moves they've made, the most interesting player to watch will probably be Derek White. Derek really has grown and has matured as a Boston Celtic. He's been a guy that has shown that he can buy into that defensive mentality. Um, he's made countless blocks, steals. He's locked in defensively, but offensively he's very talented, and he showed that he can lead a basketball team in short stretches, especially last year in the playoffs. And now he'll get an opportunity to be the team's point guard, but he'll have big shoes to fill, because Marcus Smart showed that he can play on both sides of the ball, and as much as Derek White has shown that he can, getting to that level, is really a challenge. And then I think another player to watch will be Robert Williams. Robert unfortunately had a very tough year. Last year he was limited because a knee injury basically before the season started. I think he had arthroscopic surgery, and he only played in 35 games. He could not contribute and was in and out of the lineup a lot. And even when he played, a lot of times he had minute restrictions. Robert was the anchor of the team the season prior. He's a great defender, very good lob threat, and just not having him in there, for that role, I think really hurt the team. Put a lot of pressure on Al Horford to consistently play 30 plus minutes a night. For a guy, that's aging like Horford, I believe he's 37. That's just a lot of responsibility to shoulder, and you could see that later in that postseason he was starting to wear down, and having a healthy Robert Williams will definitely help keep Horford healthy and efficient ultimately. And I think it'll be really important to kind of see where Malcolm Brogdon is. Malcolm is a guy that was Sixth Man of the Year last year, but unfortunately he dealt with an elbow injury late in the postseason. Some reports state that he might not be ready to play to start the season, and that'll be an opportunity for Pritchard, I believe, to get some consistent minutes and show that he's a very good rotational player when given that chance. But ultimately, this team is, very deep, very talented. I think 1 through 15 probably the best roster in the entire NBA. In my opinion, they have the most formidable trio. Guys like Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Kristaps Porzingis, three guys that can play offensively as well as defensively, and they can carry their team in small stretches. I see this Boston Celtics team finishing atop of the Eastern Conference standings. I think they'll be the number 1 seed. And then in the playoffs, I see them getting back to the Eastern Conference Finals and making a deep run again. If you watched to this point, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Like the video, subscribe, leave some comments. Thank you so much.